It began with a map, a standard-issue U.S. military topographic printout, creased, faded, annotated in black ink by men who'd seen too much desert and too little sky. The kind of map you don't question, the kind you follow because that's what you're trained to do. But on the night of June 4, 2009, deep in the mountains of Helmand Province, Afghanistan, a Marine recon unit found themselves standing before something that wasn't on that map. No coordinates, no entry marker, just a gaping wound in the earth, dark, cold, and breathing. They had been ordered to sweep a sector thought to be a network of abandoned Soviet tunnels. Intelligence briefings mentioned mine shafts and collapsed routes used decades ago by the Mujahideen. But what they discovered was far older, far quieter, and something inside those tunnels was watching them. The air was dry above ground, choked with sand and wind, but as the Marines descended, it shifted, thick, damp, metallic. Like stepping into the lungs of something still alive. Their flashlights swept across carved walls that didn't look man-made. Not entirely. The surfaces curved with patterns, spiral marks, strange lines like ribs. At first they joked it was just Soviet graffiti, but no language looked like this. The deeper they moved, the more their radios cracked with static. Then silence, no comms. Just the sound of their own boots and the breathing of men trying not to think about what could be below them. Sergeant Morales, the unit leader, had done 3 tours: Iraq, Fallujah. He knew what tunnels did to a man's mind. Confined space, no sunlight, no sound but your own heartbeat echoing off stone. But this was different. He said later in his debrief, what little of it was left before the file went missing, that he felt something beneath the ground hum. Like the floor itself was alive. The first chamber they reached was circular, the size of a small hangar. Pillars held up a ceiling that arched like a cathedral, and in the center, something that looked like an altar. Around it were objects, helmets, broken rifles, bones, and dog tags, U.S. issue. But the problem was, no Marine unit had been deployed to this area before 2002. And the corrosion on the metal wasn't 2 years old. It was decades. One of the men, Private First Class Danner, picked up a tag and whispered, "Sir, this guy went missing in 1968. They thought he was joking until they saw the tag. Stamped clear as daylight. L. Howard, 2439836. A Marine who had disappeared during a classified mission in Vietnam. No one spoke for a full minute. They decided to mark the location and move deeper, hoping to find an exit route to higher ground. The tunnel narrowed. The air smelled of rust and rot. The floor sloped downward, leading to another door, metal half buried in the stone. On it was a symbol carved into the surface, a circle intersected by 3 lines. None of them had seen anything like it, but Morales later said it reminded him of a radiation warning, except older, primitive. When they forced it open, the noise that came out wasn't mechanical. It sounded organic. Inside was darkness so dense their lights seemed to die. Every step forward revealed fragments of machines, rusted, unfamiliar, fused into the rock. Like someone had tried to melt technology and bone together. Then came the sound. Footsteps. But not theirs. It echoed from behind, above, then beside them, as if the tunnel itself had a pulse. They called out. No response. Danner swore he saw something move. Something pale, not human, crawling along the ceiling. By the time Morales turned his light, it was gone. They began to retreat. But when they reached the first chamber again, the altar was different. The bones were gone. The objects scattered. And in their place, a single radio, old, dented, marked with the same 3-line symbol. It clicked on by itself. A voice came through, fractured and distorted. It was a man, repeating coordinates over and over. But the voice wasn't foreign. It sounded American. When they checked the coordinates later, it pointed not to Afghanistan, but to the Quang Nam Province, Vietnam, the site of a U.S. recon mission lost in 1968. And then suddenly the light cut out. All of them. Every flashlight, every helmet cam. Total black. They said the next 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Men screamed. One fired his weapon. Something wet hit his face, blood or water, he couldn't tell. When they finally scrambled back toward the entrance, only 4 of the 8 Marines made it out. The rest were gone, no bodies, no gear, no footprints. When extraction teams arrived 2 days later, the tunnel was sealed by a cave-in. Satellite imagery showed no sign of disturbance, no heat signature, no tunnel mouth. The map was blank again. The survivors were flown back to Bagram. Debriefed separately, Morales was the last one questioned. According to the unofficial transcript leaked years later, the interviewer asked, "Sergeant, can you confirm what you saw down there?" Morales paused, then said, "Sir, I don't think we were supposed to find it. He was found dead 2 months later. Suicide, they said." But what happened after made the story spread like wildfire among veterans forums and anonymous boards. Satellite recon from the following year showed an energy signature, brief, flickering at those same coordinates. It wasn't electrical. It was something else. And the U.S. Geological Survey quietly reclassified the region as restricted for geological instability. Locals in nearby villages have a name for that mountain, the mouth of the old world. They say no one who goes inside ever comes back unchanged, that sometimes at night the ground hums like it's remembering something buried deep below. And if you listen long enough, you can hear the voices of soldiers still trying to find their way out. When the survivors returned to the U.S., none of them spoke publicly again. Their files were sealed, medical evaluations redacted, and all official statements referred to the Helmand Tunnel Incident as a geological collapse. But the classified records, those not meant to see daylight, told a different story. The 4 surviving Marines, Sergeant Morales, Corporal Vega, Private Danner, and Specialist Rios, were transferred to Bethesda for psychological decompression. They were kept in separate rooms, interrogated by men who never gave names, wearing civilian suits instead of uniforms. Each Marine was asked the same question, "What did you see?" And each gave a different answer. Vega said he saw a light like molten gold moving in the stone walls, pulsing with rhythm. Rios described hearing voices in English, whispering coordinates that led nowhere. Danner, barely coherent, said he saw faces in the dark. Dozens of them suspended in air, watching without eyes. Morales didn't say anything for the first 2 days. Then he asked for a Bible. On the 3rd night, surveillance footage from his room captured something impossible. The tape, grainy and flickering, showed Morales asleep, twitching, whispering in his dreams. The sound engineers who reviewed the tape later isolated his voice and enhanced it. He was murmuring the same coordinates that came through the old radio, underground Vietnam, 1968, but here's where the story fractures, where fact blurs with what people now call the Helmand anomaly. When a journalist named Mark Easley tried to investigate in 2016, he tracked down Vega, who had left the Corps and moved to New Mexico. Easley's notes, later found on his laptop after he vanished, contain Vega's last statement. It wasn't a tunnel. It was a connection point between what we think is real and what isn't supposed to be touched. He claimed the walls weren't made of stone but something that grew, something that breathed when no one was watching. Months after Easley disappeared, hikers found a half-collapsed structure in the mountains near Jalrez, miles from where the original coordinates were marked. Inside, there were fragments of American gear, a half-melted flashlight, and a steel door with the same 3-line circle engraved in its center. When the Afghan National Army attempted to excavate the site, their ground sensors malfunctioned. They reported interference that distorted GPS and radio frequency, as though the ground was magnetized. In Washington, internal memos surfaced under FOIA, buried inside Defense Intelligence archives. They mentioned non-Euclidean subterranean networks and acoustic distortions of unknown origin. The language was clinical, cautious, and very deliberate. But one phrase appeared repeatedly in the margins: Contact Point Alpha, reopened. Whatever the Marines had found, someone already knew it existed. Over the years, stories began to intertwine. Old veterans from Vietnam claimed to have heard the same symbol described by the Helmand survivors. In the jungles of Quang Nam, recon units had once stumbled upon cave systems that weren't on their maps either. The official line was that they were old VC tunnels, but one veteran, Lieutenant Raymond Holt, recounted that inside they found walls smooth as glass and light coming from nowhere. His report never made it to command. He said his superior told him, "There are doors we don't open twice." By 2020, satellite scans of the Helmand region revealed anomalies that didn't match any known geological structure. Hexagonal voids beneath the mountain range, perfectly symmetrical. The depth? Over 2 kilometers. The pattern? Identical to a seismic signature recorded in Vietnam in 1968. Some believe these tunnels are remnants of ancient subterranean architecture, pre-human, or perhaps something left behind by civilizations lost to time. Others say it's a natural anomaly, amplified by the fear and exhaustion of soldiers. But the ones who served there tell a different story. They say when you walk deep enough underground, you can hear the earth remember. A classified interview with Rios, declassified only briefly before being scrubbed, contained one haunting line. The interviewer asked, "If you could describe what you saw, what would you call it?" Rios replied quietly, "A mirror. But it showed us what came before men." After that, Rios disappeared from public record. His death certificate lists unspecified trauma, though no body was ever recovered. In 2023, an anonymous file dump appeared online. Photos allegedly taken from a drone reconnaissance near the Helmand Ridge. They showed a collapsed section revealing what looked like stairs spiraling into darkness. In one frame, something glimmered near the bottom, smooth, metallic, almost liquid. Within 48 hours, the images were gone. Accounts deleted, metadata wiped. But for those who had saved the files, one thing stood out. Carved into the surface of the steps was the same circular symbol, the 3 intersecting lines. No one knows what it means. Some say it's ancient. Some call it a code for a lost project, Operation Hollow Spear. Others, especially the locals, say it represents something simpler, the 3 paths that lead to the underworld. In Pashto folklore, they say beneath every mountain sleeps a shadow older than time itself. They call it Sia Dunya, the black world. And when men dig too deep, that world remembers them. If you visit the Helmand valleys now, you'll see nothing. Just sand, wind, and silence. The entrance is gone. The mountain healed itself. But every now and then, at night, villagers say they hear distant radio chatter. A man's voice repeating numbers over and over. Sometimes they match coordinates from Vietnam. Sometimes they don't match anywhere at all. And yet, the voice always ends the same way. "This is Sergeant Morales, requesting extraction," but there's no signal where he is. And no map shows the way back, because the tunnels the Marines entered were never meant to be found. The last known mention of the Helmand anomaly came not from the military but from a contractor. His name was Dr. Calvin Miles, a geologist working under a civilian research grant for subterranean mineral mapping in 2024. His report, circulated briefly in an internal geological bulletin before being pulled, contained a peculiar note. Unusual magnetic gradient beneath Sector 9B, forming a helix-like distortion consistent with acoustic feedback. He never mentioned tunnels, but attached to the file was a scanned page from a notebook scrawled hastily. "It's not stone. It's resonance." That same week, Miles went off-grid. No record of flight. No contact. Only a final voicemail to his sister. "Tell them. It's still moving down there." The audio cuts with a low rumble, as if the earth itself took a breath. For a while, the story sank, buried like everything else. But soldiers talk and legends breathe in silence. Stories passed between veterans' bars, late-night radio channels and online threads where usernames vanish faster than they appear. They say one of the recovered hard drives from the recon team's cameras contained a few seconds of corrupted footage. Frame by frame, analysts reconstructed the image. Grainy, infrared. What it showed wasn't clear. A human silhouette, yes, but behind it a curve, smooth and metallic, emerging from the wall like the edge of an enormous ring. The figure moved closer. Then the image warped as though the sensor couldn't comprehend the space it was seeing. The frame stretched, folded inward, and then black. Some claim that last frame wasn't noise. That if you enhance it, you can see writing carved faintly into the surface behind the Marine. Not English, not Arabic, but something far older. 3 intersecting lines. Years later, a linguist specializing in Proto-Sumerian scripts stumbled upon a similar symbol in a forgotten catalog from the British Museum. The note beside it read, "Associated with underworld crossings, symbol of the tripath or return point." In Mesopotamian myth, such symbols marked the entrances where humans could traverse between worlds, the living, the dead, and the unseen. The linguist unknowingly had given the military's mystery a name, the tripath seal. Now, if you ask any Marine who served in Helmand around 2009, they'll tell you about the heat, the dust, the endless silence of mountains too wide for sound to travel. But a few, the ones who remember that night patrol, speak differently. They say they sometimes wake up at 2:43 a.m., the exact time their comms went dark. They hear a tone in their ears like a radio signal with no message. Some say it's just trauma. Others think it's something trying to call them back. The Pentagon denies all of it, of course. No tunnel, no lost soldiers, no anomaly. But there's something strange. The GPS coordinate range for that area now redirects to a dead zone in every open-source map. The satellite data stops just short of the ridge, and if you fly a drone near it, the footage freezes. Always at the same frame count, 2439 milliseconds. A number that veterans claim matches Sergeant Morales' last recorded call sign. Unit 2439, coincidence maybe. But every myth starts somewhere, so the story lingers, half whispered, half buried, like the tunnels themselves. They say the ground in Helmand still hums when the wind dies, like a radio tuning between frequencies. And if you stand there long enough in that silence, your heartbeat syncs with the pulse beneath your feet. Some swear they've heard a voice inside that hum, a man's voice, calm, tired, fading. This is Sergeant Morales. We've reached the end of the map, and then only static. End of script. Fiction, inspired by U.S. military myths, Mesopotamian underworld legends, and alleged classified anomalies in war zones. Would you like me to now write the cinematic narration version, complete with voiceover tone, pacing notes, ambient sound cues, and camera direction, so it can be directly adapted for a YouTube documentary video? Ban John Noi, Continue Chat GPT, John Noi, Part 4, The Lost Frequency. The static never stopped. Even after the files were buried, after the coordinates were erased, and after the last surviving Marine was laid to rest under a flag that no longer knew his name, the frequency still pulsed. At first, no one noticed it. It was faint, buried beneath white noise, surfacing once every few months across old shortwave channels. A ghost signal bouncing off nothing. But the ham radio community did, and they called it Signal 2439. It carried no music, no voice, just a constant rhythmic hum. But at irregular intervals, 3 tones played, rising like coordinates in sound. And then, always at the 23rd second mark, a faint whisper in English. Contact point confirmed. By 2025, the signal had appeared in 3 different hemispheres: Afghanistan, Vietnam, and the Nevada desert. Each time the local magnetic field spiked, birds stopped moving, compasses spun, and each time the sound vanished before any official team could record it properly. But the pattern was clear. 3 locations, 3 lines, each connected by a precise geometric angle, the same symbol carved into the tunnel door. When researchers at DARPA were quietly tasked with tracing the anomaly, one analyst, a young physicist named Amira Levin, began to see the larger shape. She overlaid the coordinates onto a world map, drew the connections, and realized the lines intersected not just geographically, but historically. Each site corresponded to a war zone where U.S. soldiers had gone missing underground. Khoisan, 1968. Helmand, 2009. Groom Lake, 1983. 3 disappearances. 3 unmarked tunnels. One pattern. Levin's last email before she resigned, later leaked by an anonymous source, read, "If you think we're studying an anomaly, you're wrong. It's studying us. The pattern isn't random. It's recursive. It keeps reopening." After Levin vanished, her apartment in Arlington was cleared by unknown men in unmarked uniforms. Her laptop, notebooks, and drives and all gone. But neighbors reported something odd the night before she disappeared. The power flickered 3 times, and then they heard a deep, vibrating hum from beneath the building. In the months that followed, whispers spread through military chat rooms, the kind used by old vets and private contractors who knew how to talk without being found. One user, under the handle GhostRecon68, claimed he had served with Morales' unit. He said the tunnels weren't a discovery. They were a return. It wasn't the first time we found them. It was the first time we realized they were still open. He spoke about a sensation, a vibration in the air that made the ground seem hollow, as if the earth itself was a shell. He said Morales used to talk about the hum, even before the mission, that it came to him in dreams, always from below. Now, years later, locals near the Helmand Ridge speak of a strange phenomenon. When the wind dies, they say the air feels charged, like before a storm. Dogs refuse to go near the foothills, and on moonless nights a faint light flickers beneath the sand, as if something deep below is still alive, still waiting. There's a Pashto phrase they whisper, Damak Shwai Zamin. It means the awakened ground. In 2025, a satellite owned by a private aerospace company captured a brief thermal anomaly over the same coordinates. It appeared for 19 seconds, the shape of a spiral glowing faintly through the rock, then gone. The company's data logs were wiped a day later. The technician who handled the feed filed a report before quitting. It didn't look natural. It looked like something opening. If you tune into shortwave channel 4625 at precisely 2:43 a.m. UTC, sometimes you can still hear it. A hum, low and steady, then 3 tones, and a voice, faint, almost human. "This is Sergeant Morales. We've reached the next point." The light's moving again. And then the signal fades, replaced by silence that feels heavier than sound. Maybe it's just interference. Maybe it's myth. But there's something you should know. Every time that signal plays, seismic sensors across 3 continents detect a tremor. Subtle, rhythmic, as if the world itself is remembering the sound of footsteps beneath it. And if you listen carefully, beneath the hum, beneath the static, you can almost hear them. The echoes of men walking through the dark, still searching for a way out, still following a map that never should have existed, because somewhere under the dust and silence the tunnels breathe, and they're not done opening.